What's your soul purpose? It's what you came here to accomplish. It's also who you're meant to become so that you can make an impact by being yourself. We're all here to unlock our potential and create positive change in the world. Everything starts with you. One is not born into their purpose, one steps into their purpose. Were you born to do it? Let's find out together. Welcome to Born to Do It, a podcast about the positive change makers around us. Today, we're going to be talking about the power of authenticity when it comes to education and getting to know who we are as part of that process of self discovery and empowering ourselves to the point where we can embrace the fact that there is a leader within all of us. And I've got an education consultant and leadership coach, Stacey Gonzales, with me to guide us through the process. Welcome, Stacey.
Thank you so much. I was so pumped up from that intro. It's great.
Great to hear it. Before we dive into the education element and the spirituality and the leadership, I'm very curious. What was your childhood dream?
Oh, that's such a great question. I wanted to be Wonder Woman. I was obsessed with Linda Carter back in the 80s, her gold rope. I think I was Wonder Woman for Halloween like 3, 4 years in a row. And I just thought here was this woman that was flying in invisible planes and saving the world, right? And that was my dream. That was my dream to be Wonder Woman.
Saving the day. Well, you are doing that with your experience in education and now transitioning to leadership, saving the day for people that are a little bit lost and trying to find their place. And
Mm.
one of your phrases is turning expertise into sustainable, profitable business ideas. So I think you are saving the day for people. And a lot of people are seeing you as that Wonder Woman figure.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, it'd be an honor to be seen that way, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think it's important for the little girls that are looking to these superheroes to realize that we get to put that meaning into what it means to be Wonder Woman or Batman or Superman. We get to redefine those meanings. And maybe the school curriculum isn't giving us that power just yet, but we as the leaders, as the educators outside of that classroom are doing that for the people that are looking for new role models. And so now that we've transitioned from the childhood ages to the classroom, I'd like to use your experience to figure out what did you find useful from those years when you spent in school as the student and as the teacher. What did the school system did well and is
Mm,
doing well at the moment?
mm. It's a great question. Schools are a reflection of our society and of our culture. Right. And so, and especially in the American education system, which really was a response to child labor, right? Which is why we thought maybe, when this United States was first forming, that we had kids working, and we're like, maybe this isn't the best thing. Maybe we should be an educated society. And so we put people in schools, and schools become a reflection, like I said, of the culture. And right now, we can see inside of our schools that there's a shift in focus. We're facing enormous mental and emotional health challenges, both for the adults and the students. And so, what I think schools are getting right is the focus on inclusion, belonging, social, emotional supports, because we've always been a nation that thrives on like building our cognitive abilities, helping us think and be smart from here. But the thing that we haven't necessarily done or maybe needed to do was think about the heart of the child, the whole, in education, they call it the whole child. And so I think there's really a shift back to what do we need to do to help support our students and frankly our staff in a really complicated and challenging time right now in society.
Absolutely. Yeah. There is a big gap when it comes to the positivity and what we're trying to teach the young, flourishing children of the world and what they're seeing on the news, all the destruction, all the chaos. So, as much as they go to school with that optimism for learning, and as much as the classroom is trying to protect them, they cannot really avoid the reality. And the reality might not be happening in their own community, but it's happening to fellow humans in other parts of the world. And we are all connected. So, it has an impact on our mental health when we're watching people go through warfare and, other kinds of chaos and conflict. What did you find most empowering when you were shaping these school curriculums? Where did you find that you can channel that Wonder Woman spirit as the person who was in charge of what the students are going to experience?
Mm, it's a great question. I think when it comes to curriculum design, there's this notion that we talk about in the education space that's called guaranteed and viable. So, guaranteeing meaning every student has an opportunity to experience a high level of rigor, a high level of expertise, that they're exposed to that. So that's the first thing, is we guarantee that. And then viable, realistic. Is the curriculum we're providing at any given age realistic? And how do we adjust and shift given the complexity of needs that students have? And so when we think about curriculum design, a lot of the work that I did when I was in the education space, I'm not anymore, but when I was, we talked about this thing called backwards design. Where do we want kids to be at the end of the school year? Where do we want them to be at the end of the semester? And every year you're kind of refining that. And like I said, you're reacting. Schools are reactive. They're reactive to what's going on in the culture, what's going on around them. And so they have to respond in ways that make sense. And so that requires a continual feedback loop when you're designing curriculum to make sure you're really hitting all the marks.
Did you ever conduct feedback from the children?
Oh, always. Yeah, I was really lucky. Most of my career was spent in high schools, ninth grade to 12th grade, but I did work in a very, very large K-12 public school. And anytime, because I sat at that, I was only in the classroom for 4 years and then quickly moved my way to the C-suite, in the executive
Mhm.
role. And it was always important that for any initiative, anything we were doing, that we had students on our committees. And kids are kids, and kids are great,
Mhm.
and they will tell you the truth, and
Yep.
they will tell you what's realistic and what's not. And so by doing that, it always made sure that the students were at the center of the work.
What was the most honest, harsh feedback that you received?
Mm, it's a great question. Okay, I'm going to tell you a story about when I was in the classroom.
Okay.
This is a great story. I had a kid. Now, I taught freshman English, and I taught the class where the kids came out of eighth grade. They were socially promoted. A lot of minorities, a lot of boys, a lot of Black boys, essentially, was my class. And I had just a couple of other kids in there. And I had a kid, a white boy who had long hair. And one day he was sitting, I was teaching, I don't remember what I was teaching, maybe Romeo and Juliet or something like that. And he was like, flaking, like going like this and getting his hair flakes were like flying all around his head on the kids around him. And I had this moment and I was like, Zach, that's disgusting. Stop. It just kind of like came out
Mhm.
of me. And he stood up and he said, "You're not going to talk to me that way," and walked out the door of my classroom. Now, I was a new teacher. It was probably like my first or second year. I was young at the time. And I just knew in that moment, oh my gosh, am I going to get fired? Like I knew I was wrong, and
Mhm.
I knew I was scared for my job. Right, I was young, and so I walked out in the hallway, left the kids in the classroom, and I said, Zach, I'm so sorry. Can you come back in? I will apologize in front of the class. It was just such in an instant, I knew I had overstepped and just reacted. And, if you're a parent, if anybody listening is a
Mhm.
parent, you'll get that. You'll remember those moments. And thankfully, I was just, that feedback came in such a direct way, him standing up and be like, "You're not going to talk to me like that." And it changed the dynamic. I came back in, I said, Zach was right. I shouldn't have talked to him like that. Let's move forward. And it was beautiful. A beautiful way to move forward from there. So yeah, I'm open to all feedback.
It's a very natural reaction. I was gonna say it sounds just like a mom reaction. It's like, "Come on,
Totally.
stop doing that."
Yes.
But it's also that teaching moment where the children are teaching you how to be a better
Yes.
human being, a better parent, a better guardian, because the way we react is usually the way others have reacted towards us when we've done something that maybe we shouldn't have done. But children usually lack that self-analysis, or, it's not as advanced as our level of self-analysis where we get to control our impulses and always be mindful of other people around us. So it's still up to us to lead by example and have that responsibility of empowering
Absolutely.
them versus shutting them down, whatever they're doing, even if it's wrong.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you know what? I loved high school kids. I just felt like the wisdom that adults missed. Like
Mhm.
there was wisdom inside these kids that if you got quiet enough and if you gave them some space, they would share and they'd open up and expand my viewpoint, right? Because I don't know what it's like to be a teenager now. I'm almost
Mhm.
50. Like at the time, I mean, maybe I was 35, but still it was a very different. I just knew that they needed a place and a space to explore their voice and use their voice in constructive ways for good. And so I had a wild classroom. It was loud. We did activities. It kept me going every day. And from there, I just took that energy and then started to use that with the adults. Right? You kind of never take the teacher out of the leader.
I don't think so. No, I think they share a lot of skills, a lot of similar understanding of the world around them, and a similar sense of responsibility. But there's something about that feedback loop between teacher and student that I think is essential when we transition to leadership in the actual workplaces. But before we leave the schoolroom, what are we doing bad when it comes to educating humans? When it comes to educating when it comes to giving us a good head start in life, because the bad experiences that we collect at school affect us as we go into the real world as adults, because we carry those traumas or early life understanding of the world and some of those gaps that we don't even know that are there, such as time management, money management, energy management. These are things that are not really being covered in most schools around the world, globally speaking. Our levels of empathy, our sense of who we are, that identity training, asking those big questions. I think school is fantastic when it comes to the small talk because it prepares us for meeting new people once we leave that structure of the school. But when it comes to the big talk, there's usually a stigma around asking specific questions or going into specific topics. It's almost like the adults tell us, oh, it's not yet to talk about it. You don't cover it at school. And then you go into the world and it's like, oh, I'm just going to stick to what I know, that comfort zone. So it becomes more difficult for us to grow and leave that comfort zone because we've been conditioned to just stay there because it's safe.
Yes. Yeah. It's interesting listening to you, kind of walk through that. I can think back to moments when teachers would say to me, develop some sort of a program or we'd have some sort of initiative and teachers would be like, "I'm not a counselor. I'm not here to be a counselor. They need to come in, sit down, learn. I'm here to teach them." Kind of there's that to that they're not wrong, right? Like that
Mhm.
I can say to them, I understand that. But I also am saying we're in a different time and place and space than like maybe when you were going to school and what it was like for you and the student that you were, because great students become teachers. It's not typically the students who weren't. I wasn't a great student. I became a teacher to change the system. That was my goal in teaching, to impact students and to change the system. A lot of teachers, though, are not like that. They were the star students. They were the honors kids. They really liked school. They really liked the structure of school. And so many times in our teaching staff, it's a struggle for them because the way that it worked for them is not the way it works for most.
Mhm.
And so that's a really big and don't get me wrong, it's not that they didn't come become teachers because they don't love kids and want to make an impact. Of course they do, but they also, especially, you know, teachers between the 6th through 12th grade where they're more specialists in their area, there's that becomes a barrier. So, whether it's the teachers or not, additional supports are needed. People to come in and do holistic, mindfulness work, dare I say, meditation, right? Breath work. So, teaching children things like tapping and things that are not maybe traditionally taught they're maybe used with like our special education students or our students who are second language learners or students who have behavioral problems, but these are things that should be for all. We all need to know, how do we center ourselves? How do we ground ourselves when things are getting tough? How do we emotionally regulate? And so it is teachers' responsibility to help students with some of these areas, that they struggle with. Identity is huge. In our culture, identity is huge. People don't know who they are, so they're slapping all these types of labels on themselves, identifying with a label versus identifying with a deep soulful source inside of themselves. So yeah, those are just some of the things that I feel like, can we move this needle in such a profound way to really make an impact? I hope so.
I hope so too. Yeah. And I think there is a link between the lack of identity people experience and also the idea that they're not supposed to ask specific questions. That curiosity gets blocked almost. It gets suppressed. No, it's for your own good. You shouldn't, the curiosity killed the cat. That's saying curiosity killed the cat. So we're being taught to fear certain aspects of knowledge. Whereas the more we know, the more we understand how many more gaps we have when it comes to our education, our wisdom, our understanding of the world. And also, the more we understand, thanks to that knowledge, the more we can relate to one another. So, knowledge is empowering us to be better to one another, not just better at our jobs, but better as human beings, as leaders, as teachers, as even students of life. Because the more we learn, the more we advance the emotional and the intellectual, the IQ and the EQ, as they go hand in hand. But what you just said, that we actually covered that in one of the episodes, where a lot of teachers, they go into that job because they found that sense of belonging in the school, and they love what they're doing, but it's also kind of giving them that validation. So it's a little bit ego driven. And of course, they're helping people, but it's that awareness. Are they actually aware that this is where they're getting some sense of some dopamine? And that dopamine is external. You're getting that feel good about yourself energy from other people validating you. And as a teacher, you need to disconnect from that, so that that dopamine is connected to your own why, your purpose. Why are you here? But that comes again to that point of self reflection and finding your purpose and finding your why. Is there a type of test maybe that teachers go through as, their qualification process, where they're kind of suggest maybe you should go into that subject? Or is there a process where people can find their why, as Simon Sinek guides business leaders? Is there a process like that for teachers?
No, there's not really. I mean, a teaching pathway is a pathway that is a licensure pathway in the US, unless you're in a private school. But for the majority of education in the United States, it is a credentialed, think of like nursing, doctors,
Mhm.
right? It's a very highly credentialed profession, but it does not have the same professional view as like maybe when I say doctor or nurse or something like
Mhm.
that. It's not easy to become a teacher, and we're also in a teacher shortage, right? So we're in a place now where people are not going into this profession, and the barriers to entry are great with all the testing, especially if you want to be an upper grade teacher, because you not only have to get your education, all your education courses, but then all of your experiences, which a lot more in the your area of expertise. So like I was an English teacher, my husband's a science teacher, so you have to take a lot more classes versus like if you're an elementary teacher,
Mhm.
right? So that's the pathway, and it's not focused for the now again, I've been out of it for a while, so I don't want to speak to like the higher education system. I'm not as in touch as I used to be, 10 years ago when I was in the seat still. But I do think that it's challenging because we probably have people in our communities that have associate's degrees, have different experiences that would be really valuable, and have a desire to
Mhm.
make a difference in the classroom, but the barriers to entry are huge, and the starting salaries, depending on where you live, are pretty minimal for something that maybe takes you more than 4 years to earn that degree. So
Mm.
there's a lot of complications in the US public education system itself. I keep thinking and kind of sitting back and now watching and thinking, what is it going to take for this system to really transform? What will it take? And I don't know. I don't know. I feel like with the shootings and with, some of the things that are pretty tragic and really challenging in schools, you would think that might be the like wake up call, but it doesn't feel that way to me.
Mhm.
As a matter of fact, one of the reasons why I left education was because the politics and the bureaucracy became so um like I couldn't breathe. I mean, it was so challenging for me that I couldn't innovate and make the moves that could like really make an impact. So in the for-profit market space, there's a lot of people doing a lot of cool things. But it's more so like after you graduate,
Yeah.
like different sorts of. So I don't know what it will look like though for the actual education system in the US.
Yeah, and the way that you were describing and talking, I was just reminded that the prestigious professions, two of them are being a doctor and being a lawyer. So, what do? They solve two types of crises: a crisis to do with your health, so there is a problem and it's life threatening, and the other one is a crisis with your finances, with your love life, with your relationship.
Yep.
So, the way that the economy is boosting these two industries is by creating more problems so that they can solve them,
Mhm.
which is why they're getting more money. So, the economy is succeeding in creating more problems for us. That's why it's not investing in education, because education would solve those problems. So I
That's a
think the
great point.
economy is scared. What would the world look like if we didn't have problems? Obviously, we're always going to have problems so that we can have innovation. But I think the way that
Mm,
the economy is being driven right now is by boosting the ego. So the
yes.
ego wants to prove itself. Let's give the ego more problems. Let's create life-threatening problems for the body. Let's feed the children and their parents with fast food and things that, damage the cells, damage the DNA, so that the genes get impaired and all these chronic conditions get developed. And then the lawyers, because if you're unhealthy, you're carrying that anger, that pain with you for years. So your mental health gets affected as well. So you start having these relationships that are a little bit more just fighting all the time. So the education gets completely ignored. And I think what it's going to take to change the education system is actually us healing, us
Mhm.
saying enough. I don't want to participate in this. I'm going to take a step back. I'm going to fix my diet. I'm going to fix my relationships. So when we have the population healing, the nations around the world healing themselves and raising these new children, the education system has to change to catch up with the healthy humans that are being born and being raised. And I think the economy cannot ignore that anymore, which is why we're having this conversation about mental health and mindfulness and meditation and the breath work and all of these beautiful concepts that are actually helping us thrive in society. Because if you think about how we're being conditioned for this sedentary lifestyle, it starts from school.
Yes.
Children are
Yes.
sitting for 40,
Yes.
50, 60 minutes and then 5 minutes of break, go back to it. That's, if you think about it, that's not okay, because now we have these adults that are suffering with chronic illnesses because of that conditioning. So something has to change, and we're being encouraged to go and take more walks. Well, why can't the children start doing that? But anyway, these are exciting.
These are the right, you're asking all the right questions. How do we teach
Mhm.
students and the adults, frankly, because the
Yes.
adults in education are their own worst enemies. When I first left education, I thought I'm going to work with teachers and educators. I was like, I can't. I'm still in the box, and it's so frustrating. And there's a lot of martyrdom syndrome, and there's a lot of
Mhm.
victimization mentality, and there's a lot of savior complexes, like they're saving these children from whatever their
Yeah.
terrible environments are. It's really messed up. And one of the things when you were speaking, I was like, yeah, what would it be like if we told children, like, your life is in your hands, you have
Mhm.
choices? I had moments like that in my classroom a lot. I wasn't anywhere near the awareness of who I am today, right? But I knew at the heart of each kid was a soul and something that needed to be nurtured and brought out. And I would say to my kids, you have a choice. You don't have to sit here. If you don't want to be here, the door is there. You can leave. Where am I going to go, miss? You going to send me in the deans? I don't know. I don't care where you go. You can walk out the door because you have a choice right
Mhm.
now.
Yeah.
And what I'm asking you to do is listen to me read to you and follow along. And when I ask you a question, give me the best that you've got. Think a
Mhm.
little bit, pause, take a breath. So There are people out there doing their best. I just don't know, to your point, right? Like the parent, it has to come. Somebody reached out to me today about some work they're doing with families, right? In helping families with their children. And my husband and I talk about this all the time. There's only so much a teacher can do.
Mhm.
There's only so much that we can do. We've got the kid for what, 50 minutes, maybe once, every couple days or whatever that looks like, depending on their schedule. So, teaching children to sit in their own sovereignty, like how do we do that? I think it can be done. I just don't know who's doing that work.
Yes, and that's kind of my next question to you. But before that, I do want to mention that it's you asking the children to be present. And I think a lot of parents don't have the patience or the wisdom or the awareness to do that. So they onboard these children in very narcissistic households because they haven't healed their trauma and now they're conditioning them to dissociate. So the children go to school and they dissociate. And many of us grew up with that dissociation because it was a way for us to cope. We weren't actually present. We could have learned so much. We could have unlocked so many skills and talents and creativity, but we were
True.
dissociating because we were carrying that pain or that guilt or that shame. And it's that narcissism in society. And we're seeing the result of it now, even burnout. Burnout is really us being fed up with wearing those masks and pretending to be someone that we're not just so that we can get that attention or approval or love. But what would that classroom of the future look like? And the way that I thought about it,
Mm,
it's not just the teachers that are shaping it, it's not just the children, it's also the parents and also the community that is around that school. Because in order for a school to be successful, it has to have that connection to opportunities in the community. So there's a whole village supporting the school, as the school is the village that supports the children. So yeah, very timely that you mentioned that it's not just the teachers,
that's
it's
right.
a lot more. Have you seen parents get better at supporting that education flow, or are they relying even more on the teachers to do the heavy lifting?
Hmm. It's a good question. I think it's different depending on where you're at in the country, and schools are a part of local communities.
Mhm.
And so the vibe of the school is a reflection of the community. And so I've traveled all over the country and visited schools all over the country looking at some of the most innovative schools. And so it really depends. Like there isn't you can look at where kind of high performing, high awareness, self-awareness, self-regulated schools are across the country, but I think I think it's a big job, and honestly, there's a lot of politics involved in schools.
Mhm.
There's all the funding is tied to governmental, funding, and so that ties up a lot of things in nonsense. There's just a lot of, and I do want to say this though, we are serving a lot of children and safety is at stake. So you need structure when you have
Mhm.
that many people in small spaces all together, right? Like so the structure is important. I understand why we have policies and procedures, but many times my sense, especially as I elevated to those higher levels within the organization, those red tape and those bureaucracies prohibited us from doing some of the right work.
Yes, yeah. And there is that sense of get somebody else to do it because now that I've achieved this level of success, I'm not responsible for it. When in reality, leadership and getting higher on that executive journey is you take more ownership, you take more responsibility, and you're willing to get those risks, take those risks because you believe in that vision. But I think once again, it's a little bit like the high school mentality where the more you elevate to become that popular kid or the person that people look up to, you get used to people doing things for you versus you doing things for other people and empowering them. And it's the inverted structures that are kind of preventing that growth because those that are higher up, they should lead that growth and lead by example. And I think they reach that comfort zone where they're enjoying the benefits, but they I'm not even sure. I think they're just getting stuck with the benefits and that's it. And I think the economy has conditioned us in every industry that once you get comfortable with a specific salary, you
Mhm.
start to relax.
Yeah.
And that's okay for your nervous system, but
Yeah.
everything is it's so transitional. We don't live here for thousands of years. So there's a certain amount of time where we can make a difference and shape the next generations and contribute to them and build our legacy. So it's very easy for the adults to get distracted by the shiny objects, a little bit like the cat that just chasing the next big shiny item. But based on your experience of being a teacher and being a leader and learning about teaching, education, and leadership, what are some of the great shared skills that both teachers and leaders should aspire to develop?
Hmm. Well, the the first skill that I think is really important, not only in the education system, but in any professional endeavor, right? Which we hope school is preparing students, right? That's what we hear. It's preparing you for work to enter the world of work. Um, and now that I'm in the for profit space, the thing that I notice that when teachers want to transition out, when I've talked to teachers, when they want to transition out, they don't know how to manage up. They don't know how to uh, ask for feedback, specific targeted feedback, be responsible for their own learning, their own growth. And so those skills of being able to advocate for yourself and what you need, and how you need it in clear communicative ways, both in writing and speaking, I think are areas that are really important to hone for teachers and for leaders, whether you're leading in education or you're leading in somewhere else, right? The work is to lead yourself. And so that skill of being able to know what you need, know how to ask for what you need, know who to ask, how to communicate that ask is probably a critical skill that many of us didn't necessarily learn in school, because school teaches you that you're creating whatever it is you're creating for your teacher and your teacher alone. And that teacher is going to tell you what you should think about your work.
Yeah,
And so that is a very opposite way of how growth actually happens. Growth actually happens when I have agency and autonomy to create my work, reflect on my work, get feedback on my work, and readjust my work.
and
Um,
defend it as well if you believe in it.
Absolutely. Or interdependent, right? In interdependent feedback loop, whether it's with the teacher, student, leader, teacher, student, employee, boss, whatever that dynamic is. And so I think especially in the school system, because it's so structured and hierarchical, like it is hierarchical by nature. There are positions, you go from a teacher to a assistant principal to a principal, a dean, or however, whatever that trajectory looks like. And it gets it's really easy to stop thinking, or stop feeling, just to kind of the structure gives you everything you need within it. To your point earlier, you are making a reasonable amount of money to live a pretty comfortable lifestyle. And so, and you have many school teachers have pensions. There's not many other places in the United States anymore where you actually have a pension. Maybe police, maybe any sort of community based thing, maybe your public officials and your teachers. And a lot of states, like my state, they have unions as well. And so it was really hard as a leader. Communication was huge, because anytime I wanted to make a big change, especially in that school district where we had 36,000 students, 5,000 staff members, I was sitting at the top as a decision maker at that executive level. My first go-to with anything that I wanted to deliver, I mean, even just getting Chromebooks out to all 36,000 students and Google Drive, right? I had to work with the teachers union really closely. I had to work with the attorneys really closely.
Mhm.
So those shared skills of being able to communicate and collaborate are crucial.
And I would say identity is big. And if you don't develop that identity when you're at school, you're going to have to adopt an identity to until you're ready to start asking those questions. Well, who am I? Because when you know who you are, it's much easier to advocate on your behalf, because you have that confidence, you have that knowing, well, even if I don't get this job, even if I lose that job, that identity of who I am is still there, because then you start to look at your experience as the learning paths for you to develop certain skills. And the more you understand who you are, and the more you develop this appreciation for who you are, because sometimes it's worth fighting for something, especially because change happens when you're within the structure a lot easier if you're outside, compared to being outside. But some battles are just not worth it, I would say, if you have the skills to start that company alone with the founder, start some sort of alternative way, and then bring that change to the industry. But there is so many different pathways for both teachers and leaders to bring the change that they believe should be brought into the world, because it's not just about following the structure, it's also about how can I adapt that structure to match the expectations and the priorities of today's world, because the world, especially with technology, is changing so fast. I don't think the education can actually keep up with all the technological changes. And so we're seeing young people that are getting bored in the classroom because they're getting that dopamine. They're learning how fast they can learn about the world through social media. So they go to school and school is boring. It does not capture their attention. And yet all the adults, when they go back into the real world, they discover that what makes a workplace so great is the people. So we're trying to recreate the same room, the same environment from school in the workplaces. And there's a different element to your journey as a leadership coach, your own spiritual awakening that has probably shifted your view of education and leadership in many ways. And so I'm guided to ask you, where do you see yourself channeling that potential that you have discovered about yourself and that you're still unlocking? And what are the types of industries that you would like to plant seeds into? It doesn't have to be just the education. And are there industries that you feel more connected to, more feeling called to impact? And I've included the phoenix here because if you remember the phoenix, it burns down so that it can be reborn. And some of the changes that we bring into industries, it's like that. We burn down the old structures so that we can
Yes.
grow them. And you?
I'm really good at burning shit down, okay? Sometimes out of desperation and, when you talked about burnout, right? Burnout,
Mhm.
sometimes we have to burn out to burn down and get it all out of our system, and that's what happened for me. When I left education, I was in a terrible place. I was really emotionally dysregulated. I was so thin. I had lost so much weight. I
Mhm.
had said to my husband, um, do you think I need, or he said to me, do you want to go for a mental health evaluation? We've got great medical care, right? Like, and I was like, I don't know. And the fact that I didn't know, and I was a leader who said to other people, hey, you know what? I think you need to take some time off. Why don't you go see a counselor? Like I was the one doing that with my staff. And so when it was me, it was shocking.
Mhm.
But I needed to go through that to come out on we all have these, our own dark night of the soul experiences. And so I needed to go through that. I didn't know that's now called shadow work. I now know how to do that in bits and chunks where it doesn't destroy me to get to those deeper levels. So I love that you put the phoenix on there, because that is the work of each of us to continually refine those layers and deepen our understanding through our quote unquote, if you want to call it awakening process, if
Mhm.
you will. And so I knew I wanted to do creative work. I always had this like limiting belief that would say to me, you're not creative. You can't create. You're not an artist, right? Like, because back in the days, I'm a Gen Xer. What were there things to aspire creatively to? Singers, actors. Like, there wasn't this prolific, like you could be a creative creator. And so I was in my role and I started to get some recognition. And my social media on LinkedIn kind of started to connect me with educators across the country, which then turned into seeing other professions, other creatives, other creators. And so it turned me on to this lifestyle of like marketing and creativity. And so when you say like, where am I planting my seeds right now, it's in the marketing industry, right? Like building out, helping people, especially in this day and age where, um, for people like me who are very purpose driven, who have a very strong sense of self and who they are, how do you represent that online, genuinely, authentically to attract people, the right people to you? I think it's a real gift and a skill and a talent to be able to put that mirror up and have somebody really illuminate who they are digitally and then get to meet that person. You're like, wow, that really represented who you were. So figuring out how to do that with people has been so much fun. It's so much fun. It's like creative people work, is what I'm doing and where I'm kind of planting some new seeds.
It's the right brain. It's unlocking more of the right side. So advancing beyond the level of the logic and really tapping into the creative intelligence, as Deepak Chopra writes in his book. It's not just about being creative and creating art, but using that creativity to problem solve. And as we mentioned earlier, there are so many industries that have so many problems. They're just waiting for these creative people.
They're waiting. They're knocking at our doors. I love that you said that. I'm a huge human design Gene Keys fan. I study every day, and I have the 63.4 channel, which is the channel of logic. But then I also have the community relationship channel. So when I do my work, I remind myself my logic and analysis is an important part, is a complement to my creative community building side. So I've really been learning how to kind of marry those two unique areas that I have inside of my kind of energy centers. It's been great.
I think this is why we're all awakening at the moment, because this is a massive shift in our consciousness and the way that humanity operates. Because it's time to connect the left brain and the right
Yes.
brain. And it's time to connect the people that are already operating within those spaces so that we don't have this division, oh, men and women, black and white, and
Yes.
logic versus intuition. No, no, no. We both have access to both aspects. There is a masculine energy in all of us and feminine energy in all of us.
That's right.
They just have different labels. And once we integrate all parts of ourselves,
Yes.
we might need to burn down a couple of times like that phoenix, but we're
Yes.
going to become more integrated and more balanced, more grounded. And we're going to be more integrated with our higher self, which is, again, a concept that I think children can teach us more about than we can teach them because they're so much more connected to their soul, to their spirit, to their kind of spark that comes from the divine intelligence. So it's a very interesting time to be a teacher, to be a leader, and to be learning about everything to do with spirituality.
It is a great my husband and I say this to each other all the time. It is such an exciting time to be alive. I really feel that, especially when I jump on these business calls. So I do two things. I do business calls and then I'm also an evidential psychic medium. It's a fascinating life, right? And so sometimes I get on business calls that turn into like mediumship readings,
Mhm.
and sometimes I get into mediumship readings that turn into business calls.
Yeah.
And it's just it's learning how to bring exactly what you said, these two sides of myself together, and me feeling really comfortable with the fact that like I'm just learning this. I'm just starting. I mean, this has only been really a year and a half for me of this like quote unquote awakening space, right? So it's been a lot of fun.
I can relate, and I can absolutely relate to your burnout story because the way that I left my old life and my old job, it was overnight. I woke up and I just could not go back. Like literally something was shut down in my brain and my brain would not allow me. It's like self-preservation, whatever it
Yeah.
is. But
Yeah.
I just remember feeling this is it. This is how much I can continue to give to that old life as much as I want to, because it was a life that allowed me to be creative. But it was genuinely my higher self, a part of me that is not here physically, but my spirit was guiding me to go to this new path. And as you mentioned, sometimes those spiritual conversations turn into strategy, and sometimes the strategy turns into spirituality because you're just receiving that intuitive guidance. You're more
It's
open
so
to it.
true.
Mhm.
It's so true. It's such a it's changing the way I think about everything. I mean, it really is showing me how life is a series of moments to express our trust. Trust in ourselves, trust in something bigger than us, trust in that we don't have to have it all figured out, right? It is truly I am really learning it's about trust.
And it's about self-love because the more you love yourself, the more you accept all of those parts about yourself. Because maybe you were already exhibiting certain signs that you were psychic when you were younger, but you were suppressing them.
Yes.
Because I
Yep.
had, and I've mentioned that on some of the episodes, I've had people enter my life. I had them, every year. Someone would mention astrology, numerology, birth charts. And I was like, okay, well, doesn't have anything to do with me. You do you. I'm gonna do
Yeah,
me.
yeah, yeah.
So this was not something that I ever saw about myself, but now that I'm doing it, it just feels like I've always done it. It just feels like I was always destined to do it because I've integrated a part of myself that maybe I was rejecting earlier,
Mm,
but that's
that
part
makes
of the
sense.
self-discovery journey.
That's beautiful. It's so true. When you were describing that, that feels very much for me. Many times, what's so cool is that I literally don't know how it works. And I almost feel like I'm not supposed to. That
Mhm.
enhances and increases my trust. I can make some patterns and connections. I'm smart, right? Of course I can. But really, I don't have to. I don't need to. It's just feels like a very different way of thinking and being. Because when I was in the school system, you could plan. I mean, I could guarantee, I talked about guaranteed in
Mhm.
Bible. I could guarantee by December, and we're going to do these 18 things, and I'm going to have these meetings with these people, and we're going to build the thing, and they're going to get paid in the summer, and we're going to blah, 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 right? And when I got into the like entrepreneurial space, that's not how you let you follow the thread and you put stuff out and then you wait until something's revealed to you. And I'm a projector, which means I need to wait for invitations. So like
Invitations, yeah. Mhm.
you invited. So 2024, I went all in on my experiment of being a human design projector and only creating content, got rid of all friends and business partners that weren't aligned. And it changed my life.
Yeah, yeah. No, I understand, and I've had that comment before from projectors. They're like, "Well, we were waiting for your invitation because we don't initiate it. Like that's the guidance, that's the internal guidance." And I'm a manifester, so it kind of like
Oh,
between the manifester and generator, but my energy needs to be leading the way.
yes.
So I love that the guidance from spiritual communities is, oh, you have to be more into the feminine energy, but that's not necessarily the case. Just because your gender is woman doesn't mean that you have to embody the feminine always, especially if your energy, like your natural authentic energy, is more masculine. The person that
Yes.
generates these ideas sure makes space to receive, but if you feel called to invite people, that's something that's your higher self's guiding you, especially if you've integrated with your higher self, you're on your spiritual path. So I think there are certain labels we're still working through removing so that we can make more space for us to just trust, like you
Yes.
said.
Love
Mhm.
that.
I love that as well. Letting go of that control.
Let go of the control. Let go of the control.
Yeah, it makes life a little bit easier and feels more like a flow because I've been into that position where I wanted to organize everything. I wanted to make it
Yes.
perfect. It's exhausting.
It's exhausting.
Mm,
And it you set yourself up because you set an expectation.
mhm.
And now I get to watch. It's almost like life is like watching a movie and you get to see what's kind of presented in front of you and intuitively and logically, right? Intuitively and logically you use both to be like, "Huh, I feel like that's like, yeah, that feels good. I think that's a good let's follow that. Let's
Yeah.
kind of let's follow that theme or that character or that
Mhm.
whatever is being put in front of us." And I'm finding that to really alleviate so much pressure. I was a pressure putter on myself. I put so much pressure on myself. Do, control, 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 figure it
Mhm.
out, be in charge. That, that makes you age quickly.
Yeah, and ironically, the image that comes to mind is when you put that pressure and it's like you're the popcorn. So instead of you enjoying the movie, you become that popcorn that people reach out to get from because you're the one that always has the answers, always has the ideas, always has something to give and give and give. And it seems like you're the last one to receive or the last one to experience it. And it's your own movie. And you've
That's
missed your
right.
own movie.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, we're learning every single day. We're learning. And as part of this process, I've learned about the power of numerology. So I'm excited to share what I've discovered about your name, starting with the numerology. We've got three letters and three numbers, starting with one, which is a signifier for leadership. So you're here to lead the way by paving your own path and being a thought leader who inspires an exchange of ideas. Where that thought leader comes from and the ideas is the second letter, which equals three, which is the path of communication. So You're here to express your ideas and encourage others how to unlock their authentic self-expression, because you've already mastered that authenticity. So you're here to pass that on to others while you're learning how to be more into the leadership seat of your life. And finally, you are here to build these connections and these partnerships, because seven has to do with people. It has to do with maybe one to one, maybe groups, maybe, soul tribe, but it has to do with the partnership. So the more you do things together with other people and kind of accept invitations or organize them or co-create them, the more you're going to be in alignment with your leadership as the first letter. So your success lies in strategic partnerships, uplifting other people's souls, and co-creating with them. So that path of success for you, your success blueprint, has to do with people and those partnerships. And the overall life path is that of resources, combining one, three, and seven. So those resources can be about creating the spaces for those ideas to be exchanged, but it could also be books. It could also be publishing these books. It could also be about having the offices, the businesses where you can have that interaction with people. There are many interpretations, but there's something to be said about life path too. It's about the balance between the masculine and feminine as well. It's not just the traditional understanding of what resources mean. It's about that inner balance and the self-worth and getting a more complete holistic understanding of who you are as a human being, and you seeing yourself as part of the ecosystem, not as a separate being as well. Does that resonate with you?
So much, so much. Yes, yes, and yes. And those resources, for me now feel very much like the wisdom I have at this point, especially nearing 50 this year. I just feel like I have so many resources in just the ways of, to your point, creating spaces for people and or like physical resources.
Mhm.
Oh, let me send you that. Yeah. So that feels really aligned.
Yeah, it's the example that came to mind was like the pearls of wisdom, when you clutch your pearls, but it's like you're taking those pearls so that you can give them out into the
Yes.
world one by one, and that's
Love
you
that.
sharing your resources.
I love that.
And because you mentioned that you had a different maiden name, you had a different exploration path before
Mm,
aligning with the path of partnerships and resources. It had to do with psychology. So it had to do with understanding how to relate to others through studying the human nature and applying the principles into your own transformational journey, because your path was transformation. You were meant to be that phoenix. You were meant to be always transforming, advancing, and growing. And this is not just life path 6, which is the self growth. This is the huge transformation where you get to disrupt with your presence.
love that.
And yeah, I think now that you've integrated all of the understanding, all of the wisdom and insights, you get to use that within those partnerships. So you're not that drastic force, even though you know what it's like. So you can still disrupt industries and people with those conversations, but it's in a more balanced way because of
Mm.
that integrated knowledge. So your
I love
spirit
that.
was like wildfire, but now it's calmed down and it has the power to kind of tap people and their spark comes to life.
I love that. It's so true. It's so true. And psychology was always the thing. I picked English as a major, but why? Because I could put on the different lenses. Let me look at
Mhm.
this literature through a Freudian lens, through a Jungian lens, right? Like it became this beautiful thing. So thank you for taking the time to pull this up for me. It's so cool. I've never done really anything with numerology before.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And the way that I'm using it, it's very much purpose driven. These were
Mm.
my instructions from my higher self. Adapt this so that you can help people unlock their purpose. So I've seen this being interpreted for relationships from other astrologers, numerologists, but the way that I'd like to use this, because I think we're borrowing this information from source, tapping into source,
Yep.
is I'd like to help people find their purpose in life with more ease and hopefully one day be able to connect with younger people on earth who are still trying to find their way, even when they're still part of school, when they have those personality tests. So one step at a time, but I'm happy to, see your face light
I
up.
love it. Do you do readings for people? Do you pull stuff together for people with this?
I do many things. So
Okay.
I do
My
tarot as
my
well.
husband has asked me some stuff about numerology, so on the back end, we'll connect around it because I might wanna do
Yeah,
something for
yeah,
him.
yeah, absolutely. And
Cool.
this is just, the beginning of this because we have the astrology, which is the second part.
Oh, right, right,
Well,
right. I forgot I gave you that all that stuff. You had me look up a lot of stuff and I didn't know some
mhm.
of those answers. So,
Yeah, and the natal birth chart, which I call Earth instructions, has the planets as well, which is where the biggest growth opportunities come into the picture. But I found that the first six elements, which are part of the 12 houses, the 12 signs, they help you understand more about your purpose work wise and your belonging to the world. So your sun sign is Scorpio, and it
mhm.
has seven, which is the number of partnerships, which is one more alignment symbol that you're meant to channel that depth of emotional intelligence with those partnerships to uplift other people, to bond with other people. And if you look at the Venus sign, which is also Scorpio, seventh house partnerships,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
this is confirmation that you're meant to work with your soul tribe. Whatever your success is, you're meant to co-create it with your soul tribe. And the way that you're gonna form these big connections, your inner circle, is gonna be people who understand you, so you don't have to justify yourself. They're just gonna be like, you're gonna be downloading the
Oh
messages.
god, that feels just you saying that feels great. Like, I don't have to explain myself. What?
Mhm.
It's
Yeah,
lovely.
I know the feeling.
Yeah, yeah, right. I love that.
And then your North Node is traditionally paired up with your sun sign. So this is your soul purpose going forward. This is your learning path, life path. And it has to do with purpose. It has to do with that fire spark, with the confidence, with the passion. And it's in the house eight transformation. So it's almost like the first part of your life was about preparing you how to pass that on to others with the resources that you're going to build, with the conversations that you're going to have with your soul tribe. And your past identity or your existing identity, who you've already mastered, is your moon sign. So Libra in the sixth house, which is the self growth. So you quite literally just mentioned that you were getting, you were engaging with that information with the different hats, the different lenses.
Yes.
You were learning about how to strengthen yourself and how to grow yourself through that information and doing it in a more balanced way. So, not necessarily always experimenting, but getting immersed into that research that is available. And your south node was what you were exploring, which is resources. You were exploring how to be that action driven person, how to take actions, and what those actions are going to mean for you if you take that risk. What did you learn? It's like your consciousness was doing that research. Okay, that worked, that didn't work. What did we learn? Great. Let's move on to the next room, to the next row. And that was preparing you how to understand how to apply those relationships to make big changes in society, exploring what it means to make changes on a smaller scale, then on a medium scale, and then on a large scale. And your rising sign Taurus suggests that you are very action driven, and the more you act every single day, even if it's, one action a day, that is aligning you with your sun sign, with that leader that leads with the partnership oriented mindset, with the people first mindset. So if you get stuck thinking about things, you're going to be in your comfort zone, so to speak. But
Mhm.
when you are pushing yourself out there, leaving your comfort zone and sharing from a more emotional depth, that is you aligning more with your higher self.
This is incredible, and I love it. So thank you for taking this a step further. Can I ask a question?
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Are the numbers connected to the numerology or the numbers part of the astrology?
It's a bit of both because if you look at the 12 houses, there's 12 signs that each have a house. So the life paths, they only go from 1 to 9. But the way that I was guided to use this was to borrow the meanings from 1 to 9 because if you look at 10, 11 and 12, 10 is achievement, it's success. So you can have that as a life path, but it's more of a actually there is a life path 10, so 1 to 10, but 11 and 12, they're more to do with spiritual missions and global missions, so they're more markers within the astrological profile, not entirely a whole life path per se. So it's a bit of both, the way that I'm using it at least, but I found that it makes sense and it resonates because I applied all of this to my self-growth journey and it just changed my whole life.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. It makes a lot of sense and gives me some more pieces of the puzzle, right? To kind of integrate. So thank you.
Yeah, more than happy to deliver this confirmation. And there is this sum up that I've put together, which is, Life Path Resources. But based on putting the sun sign with the North Node, you're meant to be a transformational leader. So be that thought leader who guides people towards their purpose and inspires that exchange of ideas, which is, I think, where the partnerships come into the picture a little bit more, because it's about the exchange of ideas. But it's not necessarily a path that has to do with just talking, because that is more connected to your old self. Maybe it has to do more with the organization, with the leadership side, but because you have that emotional intelligence, you know what inspires people, what motivates them. You can read the people, you can read their energy. That is the superpower that you have unlocked or mastered, because it was always within you. And then from 3, which connects to the moon sign and the south node, you're meant to be that leadership coach, because you can help people understand their strengths and unlock more of their potential as they align with the leader that's always been within them, because there is a leader within all of us. And finally, with the 7 and the partnerships connecting Taurus and Scorpio, there is a huge soul tribe alignment in your profile. So build
Mhm.
strategic partnerships and co-create the change you wish to see in the world with your soul tribe. Because as much as we can do things on our own, we do tremendous, amazing things when we get together with other people who think like us. That's when the real magic happens.
This is amazing. Overlaying this with the little bit I understand about myself with human design, the gene keys. This is a really beautiful confirmation and validation, especially when you said in the transformational leader. Right now, I'm working with an agency and I'm developing all of their operations, people, and processes, and so it feels very much. I said to somebody the other day, for the last 3 years, I've been like seeking. There's a path. Where's my path? What's the path? But 2024, I'm like, boom, my feet are on the path.
Mhm.
And now I'm like steady on it. And now, like that thing you said about take an action, take one. If you start to overthink, take an action. That's how I heard that. And that was a really nice way for somebody like me who loves data and analysis and logic and thinking, to say, oh, poop, we're thinking too much. Let's go for a walk. Let's touch a
Mhm.
tree. Let's sit outside. Let's put our feet in the grass. Let's play with the dog. Let's take an action. Because the action for me, when I get into overthinking, has to be disassociated from like the work stuff. Let me get in nature. Let me do some of that. So really beautiful. This
And
is
I
this
was
is
gonna say it's take an action, but don't forget that your sun sign is a water sign, which has to do with connecting. So either connecting with yourself, connecting with nature. So if you just take an action, that's with, related to work, that's more of an earth sign, and that's not gonna align you to your higher self. So you said it, like, because you've understood it about yourself, that
love that.
it's disconnecting. But yeah, I would say this is alignment.
This is beautiful. This is beautiful. Thank you so much.
Love it. Yeah, great to deliver this confirmation. And as I like to end these sessions, one is now born to their purpose, one steps into their purpose, and your natal birth chart is your earth instructions. But just reading about them is going to help you, but you actually need to take the time to get to know who you are and make sense of your story, because your expertise is within the experiences that you've had, and it's within those disappointments, and it's within the trauma, because the way that you've been hurt is the way that you're supposed to help other people heal from that hurt, heal from that pain, because now you have the power. You've survived it. It's made you stronger, as the saying goes, and it's made you wiser. And the people that succeed in life are the people that are the alchemists. They're able to rise above, they burn down, but they rise and they're like, okay, who shall
That's
we
right.
teach next? What shall we experience next?
Oh, thank you so much. This was beautiful.
Great to connect, Stacey. What's one advice you would give to teachers who want to unlock more of their leader, whether it's in the classroom or outside of the classroom, but those that have been on the traditional education path so far?
Mhm. What's coming to me right now is start exploring. Start exploring non-traditional modalities. Start exploring, one of the things that I did was I started using the Calm app. When I was in the schools, and I had a leader, I had 21 leaders that I met with every week, and so I would start with, we're gonna do a little, I'm gonna do a guided meditation. I didn't know anything at the time. Like I was just literally like saying what I thought I was hearing in the Calm app to the people, and so take those risks. If you are a leader and you want to kind of get in touch with yourself, there's plenty of resources Insight Timer is free. I don't think Calm app is free anymore, but like getting connected with yourself, start there. That's where I would say to start.
Yeah, and there's a lot of guided meditations on YouTube.
Yeah,
They're not as good as the Calm meditation or
yes,
these developed apps, but
exactly.
if you want to start, the resources will be given to you.
That's
If
right.
you make that intention, your higher self will help you because we're all connected to our higher selves, whether we can hear the voice or whether we can see the images or whether we can feel a certain direction is the right direction. That's our intuition. We're
Love that.
reconnecting with our intuition.
Love that.
Thank you for shining so authentically, Stacey, and for leading the way. And if it wasn't for you trusting that inner guidance and sharing more of your story and more of your insights online, we wouldn't have met. We wouldn't have had this
I
conversation. So
know. You're beautiful. Thank
thank you for
you.
projecting that light out into the world because it's attracted me, and I'm sure it's going to attract the opportunities that are going to allow you to create that change with your soul tribe because
Thank
that's
you.
in your instructions.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening. If you have any questions for Stacey, just write a comment or follow her on LinkedIn. I've added your LinkedIn profile and I'm excited to follow your journey.